Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. Today is Sunday, July 28th, 2019, and we are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America, and we welcome you all. And we will begin with our morning prayer.
From Miscellaneous Writings, Mrs. Eddy's article, Mental Practice, page 223. May divine love so permeate the affections of all those who have named the name of Christ in its fullest sense, that no counteracting influence can hinder their growth or taint their examples. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you. Just one mention that our Love is the Liberator for July is published now. It's online. The theme is Angels and Protection, which was actually a name of an article Parthen sent to us, but it's a good one. We hope you all read it. And many of you have articles or testimonies or other things, pictures, beautiful pictures in it. So we thank you all for your contributions. And we will start the next one. So,
you want to start?
Yeah. Okay, on the watching point, Linda.
Watch number 460. Watch that you accentuate and amplify your scientific declarations by knowing that the infinite power of God is back of them. Once Mrs. Eddy brought forth this point by saying, quote, "Every true and noble thought helps to raise humanity and lets the light in," end quote. What we speak humanly instantly vanishes. Radio broadcasts appear to do likewise. On the contrary, whatever comes from God continually amplifies, remains to grow louder and louder, and becomes more imperative until eventually it will fill the world. If we regard our scientific arguments as supported by omnipotence, they will let in the light that will increase and spread without limit. And
Thank you. That is beautiful. Any comments?
Well, that's what Plainfield is doing, spreading the light.
Well, yes, and we are doing it because each one of you were doing it. So never forget this. It's a very important watching point. When you are knowing the truth, it goes on forever. While if you're just in the human mind, it doesn't do anything or has even worse, a negative effect in belief. So, and it's not you doing it, it's God's word going out. All the truths that Mrs. Eddy gave us are here with us still. Not only in her textbook, but things that she thought and said. That's what this is saying. This truth ripples out forever.
So this really should be an encouragement to everyone. You know, individually, where is your consciousness? Where are you holding your thought? Mrs. Eddy writes, hold thought steadfastly to what? In the true, right? And as a result of that, the enduring, the good, and the true will
come into your experience proportionably
to their occupancy of your thought. Exactly. And the scientific basis of all this is truth is all there is. Truth is omnipotent. So if you know something that's true and you hold to it, it has all the power of God.
I like the sense of, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I like the sense of how it raises humanity, lets in the light, and it will grow louder and louder and louder. It's a beautiful sense to me.
Exactly.
And that's working for the world, not just for yourself.
Yeah. And that's why, as a scientist, you have a solemn responsibility. You can't say, oh, well, I'm just going to be depressed this morning. Thanks a lot. When you can be doing this, knowing the truth and letting it go out to bless, it will bless you, but to bless others as well. There's no time for that kind of nonsense. I used to think there was. I'd spend a lot of time feeling depressed and thinking, oh, it didn't hurt anybody else, and what difference does it make? Well, certainly hurting me, and it did hurt other people. It was very selfish, ultimately very, very selfish, and it's an indulgence. You don't have to do it. God has given you dominion over all things, including your thinking.
I used to wonder, will tomorrow be a good day or a bad day? But now I know tomorrow will be a good day. I'm so happy for that.
That's right. And no matter what the day brings, it's always a good day when you're in the truth. And our subject for the week was truth. Subject, truth. Golden text, 3 John. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And you see in the responsive reading, it says, his truth endureth to all generations. This truth that we are declaring, that we just heard about in the watching point, yes, it continues to all generations, but it must be known and practiced. So what is the truth?
God is all. God is good. God made everything good.
Thank you very much.
God is all in all.
Yes.
Supreme and omnipotent.
Yes. Yes, all these truths, we must know the truth so we can be aware when the falsity presents itself. So ask yourself, do you know what truth is? We all should. We've been studying it for years. The dictionary of it definition says that it's the constant conformity to fact or reality, purity from falsehood. We have many lessons on reality and on unreality to tell us what's true and what isn't true. It's the laws of God, his laws. Sermon on the Mount, 10 Commandments, all the laws and rules in the Bible and in our textbook.
I'm finding that sometimes it's just as powerful to be quiet about it. You don't have to say anything. And sometimes it's the best way, too, because of opposing thought or what's going on at the moment.
But I think
Right.
even when you don't say anything, it's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Very important.
Right. And sometimes it's more powerful when you don't speak. But no, without doubt.
And Mrs. Eddy says that, and for the reason you said, you don't get the resistance when you speak it. So I noticed in our last class, we got 3 thumbs down. So somebody's resisting this truth, but that's okay. We welcome you. And if you keep listening, your thought will be enlightened. So, and what did you say in your forum, Florence, about how to come to the truth, to God?
Oh, it's just humbly, and also as I'm learning, we have to be in reverence when we come to God. And if we're not feeling it, just remember what he's done and what we've read in the Bible. This wonder, magnificence, the supremacy. And I think that humbles one and makes you come in obedience, ready to obey and have faith and reliance on truth.
Thank you. I love that. And I loved where you said it was humorous, but am I coming with some other beliefs to challenge to see if God can heal me? Or am I coming full of myself, wondering why I've had healings before, but I cannot demonstrate this time? I mean, that's so true. That's because
I hear that a lot, in the practice. I don't know. I just don't know why this problem is. I've demonstrated before, why is this, like that? So, It's truth that heals. So,
that was a very good point. And that leads me to this article that Jeremy featured on our carousel by Kimball, Confidence versus Discouragement. What we are seemingly lacking in is intelligence, faith, and confidence. Error will come up and declare that you do not realize the truth. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to say, I don't realize it? It is easy to wind Christian Scientists up unless they wake up. What is your savior? Is it I'm discouraged? I cannot realize the truth? Is it I haven't enough confidence in my treatment? What is the one who is being saved going to do? He will declare, I do realize the truth. It shall not return void. It is the word of God, and I cannot be mesmerized to believe I have not confidence in it. That is what one who is being saved will know. These suggestions are the little foxes that spoil the vine. And you've got to see them. That's what I loved in Florence's forum. The thoughts that come, I'm challenging God. Or how come you healed me before, but you're not healing me now? Who says these things? For Petey's sake, who's saying all this? Who's saying you don't know?
Devil.
Yeah. Right.
The old devil.
Absolutely. But they slip by, and then you start coming under that belief. Or you get this, look at Mrs. So-and-so. She knows the truth, but I don't. Well, that is the devil too. That is not God saying that. And if you go there, you're responsible for that. It's wrong on a lot of levels. It's jealous. It's malpractice. It's untrue. You're not knowing the truth, are you?
You're believing the lie.
Yes.
And that's the big thing.
So I love that with Kimball, what he says. And as Mrs. Eddy says in Miscellany, which again Jeremy lovingly found for me this morning when I texted him, she says, trust in truth and have no other trusts. That's why you should be constantly studying the Bible, Science and Health, and prose works, so you are immersed and saturated with the truth. So you know the truth, and you cannot be fooled by a lie, which most of the world is. I thought it was interesting. I was reading where Mrs. Eddy said how important it is to teach the Bible stories to children. Their thought is so open, and they accept these wonderful stories about how God saved the prophets, and they don't question it. I was thinking about both Florence and Benjamin. I mean, Benjamin, his face lights up when he talks about Bible stories. He had them as a child. He tells me there's this book he used to read with all the pictures, and so he grew up trusting the truth. And my understanding is Florence did too.
Yes. Yeah, in Sunday school, we had little books that we would cut the Bible story pictures and put them in there, and we just loved them. And then sometimes we would have plays where we would act, in performing the Bible stories. So they were very dear, I must say, growing up.
And you see that, so that was imbibed in you, those truths. And to me, it shows in both the faces of Florence and Benjamin. Their faces are, they're lights. They shine. And ours, all of our faces should shine. Now, Florence is from Ghana. Benjamin's from Nigeria. God is no respecter of persons. And I weep sometimes when I think of our nation and other nations who are not teaching the children these Bible stories, the truths. That's why we had our watch last night for them. Because they got it in an early age. They had this trust. I mean, both Benjamin and Florence, you can feel their faith and trust in God. And they didn't go to Christian Science Sunday schools, did you?
No.
No. But it was still the truth.
And apparently it was a good thing.
Apparently it was a good thing. So, and I can remember, I've given a testimony. My mother, I was sick, very sick. She told me the story about the child that was healed by Elijah. And that healed me, reading that story. It has great power. And my thought was receptive to it. So ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And never forget that, I was meant to look up, but where Mrs. Eddy says, the truth is your friend. Some people are afraid of the truth. Why?
You're doing wrong.
Trying to circumvent it.
Well, because it demands so much from them, requires them to give up too many false beliefs, which they might cherish.
I was certainly glad with the watching point this week because I was thinking about all that stuff fading away, and every dumb thing, every foolish thing I did or said is fading away. Error has no history. That's just wonderful.
The eternal truth destroys what mortals seem to have learned from error, and man's real existence as the child of God comes to light. One of my favorite statements from Science and Health. You keep saying the truth. I don't care how, so maybe I'm telling you about people learning the Bible study or Bible stories as children. I can just, I never learned that. So what? You're here now. You can learn them now. And the eternal truth will destroy whatever error you seem to have learned. And your real existence as a child of God will come to light.
Mrs. Eddy said in retrospection and introspection that after the revelation came to her, that human knowledge faded away like a dream.
Yes.
So.
Yes. All the human knowledge faded away like a dream. That's in retrospection and introspection. So what does truth destroy?
Error of every kind.
Yes. That's why it's our friend. That's why you must never fear it. But that's why you must align yourself up with it. And how do you do that?
Very humbly.
Obedience.
To show you the way and stay in it.
What did you say, Florence?
Obedience.
Right. And by being truthful yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you are dishonest, you will attract more dishonesty to you. And honesty is what?
Spiritual power.
Yes. Dishonesty is what?
Human weakness.
Weakness.
Which what?
It's divine help.
That is a big penalty. I remember years ago I committed a white lie, just a little lie. And I read that and oh my goodness me, I had to correct that little lie because I just thought, what a price to forfeit divine help. So if you are constantly having negative experiences come to your life over and over again, what do you correct? Do you correct the experiences? That's a tough job.
Like Noel Young says, they'll follow you wherever you go.
That's it.
Because it's in your consciousness.
It's in your thought. You are that instant replay of what you're thinking. That's why you have to watch what you were afraid of. Because if you fear it, it will grow and grow and grow until you finally challenge it with knowing that it's unreal because it's untrue. So we get to the wonderful story for this lesson, Truth, which Florence wrote, and it's this beautiful, beautiful lesson on Elijah and the prophets of Baal. And the question he asks them, what does he ask? What question does he ask?
How long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him.
Thank you. How long do you halt between two opinions? Are you the pendulum swinging back and forth one day? Oh, I believe in God today. It looks like a nice day. I'll trust him today. Whoops, today is really terrible and terrible things are happening. I don't think I can trust him anymore. He probably doesn't exist. Next day, oh, yeah, it looks like he's doing okay today. I mean, are you in this? And in Science and Health, citation 2, Carol.
Which of these two theories concerning man are you ready to accept? One is the mortal testimony, changing, dying, unreal. The other is the eternal and real evidence bearing truth's signet, its lap piled high with immortal fruits.
Thank you. So which one are you going to go with? And are you just going to be a fair-weathered friend and go with it when everything seems okay? But as soon as everything seems to be a horrible mess, then you throw up your hands and are scared to death and back down. And you got to stay steady, consistent, which is what our friend Elijah did.
That just made me think of Miss A said that about retracing your steps in tears.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Retracing your steps in tears.
And she also says the more difficult the human condition, or the more difficult, I'm not sure, I can't quote it, but the more difficult the situation you find, the stronger your faith.
And the purer your love.
Love.
Exactly. Instead of backing off and forgetting about it, dig in.
You're having a testing time, and sometimes those testing times seem long. And what was it? I think Florence quoted, maybe it's the Blue Book, the question where you're saying, how long, Lord?
How long?
And what is the answer?
As long as you deny my allness, I think.
That's right. That's it. As long as you're denying my allness, it'll keep going on, honey bunch. We can all laugh. We've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Until it ceases to bless.
It will cease to occur. There's something here, some lessons you are not learning. Mainly, you're giving, a power to something that has no power, and you're believing it. And as long as you keep doing that, you will keep experiencing this thing over and over and over in your life till you stop. And just because you name the name Christian Science doesn't mean everything, your path is now a path of roses. Far from that. But with the science, you should be able to meet and conquer. Because the lesson says, what is victorious?
Truth.
Florence?
Yeah, I think it's important just to make sure we're making an important choice. And I wanted to say, Gary has an article that's been helpful for some of the people I'm working with, and it's in our section articles, an important choice. If anybody wants to read, it will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Because you are making choices every day, every moment. Mrs. Evans wrote an article about that too in her book called Choices. Yeah, you're moment by moment you're making choices, and so how long will ye halt between two opinions? Where do you search for the answers? Are you getting yourself quiet and asking God what He would have you do, or are you calling everybody and their brother to find out what they think you should do? God is.
If I could,
go ahead.
If I could add something, yeah, one thing I learned here years ago from Mrs. Evans that really shook me to the core was that she said you really have to feel the truth in your heart. And up to that point, for me, it had been more of a thinking process, just kind of, more of an intellectual knowing it, but you have to involve your heart. And for me, that was a huge shift. You've got to feel the truth. And
that's what our class was last week, the issues of the heart, your feelings, governing your feelings. Absolutely. You've got to feel it. If it's just an intellectual exercise, not much is going to happen.
And one of the things that Jesus explained to the Samaritan woman was that God is a spirit, and they who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. And what that means is we have a spiritual sense within us, and call it a feeling, call it intuition, call it a gut feel, what inspiration. It is your spiritual sense. And one of the things that we have to do as scientists is to cultivate our spiritual sense, to trust our spiritual sense, because the material senses will always deceive us, right? They can't show us who and what God is.
And you cultivate this by your gratitude. I mean, Florence mentioned it in her forum, coming to Him in humility, always going over all the great blessings. And this brings us to Parthen's forum. He quotes 1 Kings first. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the stones and the dust. In the days of Elijah, animal magnetism had gripped Israel in the form of institutionalized Baal worship. During the reign of King Ahab, it seemed that Error had succeeded in completely reversing Israel's original purpose. First, to overcome false gods of Egypt, then the false gods of the Promised Land. This reversal process had begun during Solomon's reign. He is taking strange wives, at first tolerating, then eventually worshiping their gods alongside the God of his father, King David. So Ahab's fateful marriage to a Phoenician princess, Jezebel, was only following Solomon's disastrous example. Now think of those steps. First, he took the strange wife. Sometimes it is a wife. Sometimes it comes as other ways that you're taking. And then you're tolerating. I read recently where, some countries that's one of the things that they do. They tolerate. Does tolerate ever make you feel good?
No.
No. Years ago, I read an article. It had nothing to do with Christian Science, but it was about Mayor Giuliani in New York City. And the article was called Zero Tolerance. He cleaned up New York City with zero tolerance for error. He didn't sympathize with it. He got rid of it. Tolerance is not good, because then after it says first tolerating, then eventually worshiping their gods. It's a step toward this. So ask yourself, what are you tolerating in your body, in your home, in your community, in your nation, and in your world. And then let this truth work, because tolerating is not a good word. And I believe, my understanding is it's becoming a good word. Oh, tolerance. We must be tolerant. Tolerant of what? Of error?
That's exactly what the devil wants you to do.
Yes. And it's the error talking. Oh, you must tolerate me. Otherwise, you're so mean. You're a big bully. You're not being nice to me. Well, that's an error talking. Of course, error wants you to tolerate it.
Then it turns around and doesn't tolerate.
Exactly.
Well, error can't tolerate the truth because it knows that truth is its destruction.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why Mrs. Eddy says that only science can explain the incredible evil and good coming to the surface in our world today.
And this, let me finish this one point. This is the greatest compassion you can have, because, we must be loving. This is love. Because, I'll go on reading the story by Parthens, but go ahead now, Florence.
No, I was thinking Solomon. I mean, I think the emphasis to really be praying all the time, not to be led into temptation, comes first, because obviously it seems to me that Solomon may probably have been fallen away to be swayed by such attraction to strange women, so-called.
Thank you.
So there's a first step, I feel. You are falling off yourself, and then you get swayed. Mm.
Thank you. Absolutely. And his life, look at his life. Oh my gosh, all the wealth, the money. He seemed like he was doing such a great job. How could he ever do anything wrong? And that's when you have to be the most diligent and careful. Tear or triumph harms. So he fell asleep and he got involved.
Because originally he had prayed to the Lord that he wanted wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, originally he did, and it's a beautiful story.
Right, and as a result, he prospered, and his nation prospered. And instead of worshiping the cause of his prosperity, he started worshiping the effect of his prosperity. He started worshiping the wealth that God brought. And it's a trap that will try to entrap anyone who is a successful Christian, or a successful Christian scientist, or a successful Christian nation, as our nation is.
Yes.
It is a trap that we need to be aware of and watch out for.
Because it's happening with all the materiality, all the gains it's made, and yet if we become more and more secular and we tolerate more and more error in an attempt to be loving, when it is not, it's a lack of compassion, it's laziness, it's not confronting problems, it's letting them go. It takes a lot more strength and wisdom to confront problems than to just let it go or to tolerate. And all I can say is, if you question that word, how do you feel when you tolerate? Usually you're furious inside. You're doing something that does not make you happy. And probably deep inside, you know it's wrong, but you think it's loving. This was my sense of Christian Science years ago. I tolerated everything and I thought I was being loving. Instead, I was being a jerk. Excuse me, but I was. And it took a lot of Mrs. Evans' clear, correct teaching to get me out of it and to realize what real love, divine love with an L, capital L, is, which is totally different from this human sense.
If you
Doesn't tolerating sound like you're surviving through it instead of victorious over it?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely it does. Thank you.
And if you continue to tolerate, you won't survive.
Yeah, right. It'll take you over. It's compromise. And you will end up worshiping the false gods. You watch the steps. You see what's happened to other people, to other communities, to other nations, to our own nation, to our own selves, to our own communities.
Mrs. Evans used to tell the story of an Arab in the desert, and at night it would get very cold. And the Arab would be inside the tent and nice and warm. And his camel put his nose in and said, "Master, can I just put my nose in and be warm?" And the master said, "Okay, go ahead." And then the next night he wanted to put his whole head in. And each night he wanted to put more in. And all of a sudden the camel was in and the Arab was out. And
thank you. That's right. No, thank you. That's right. That's a wonderful story. And again, this isn't about people or races or anything. This is about truth versus error. And anybody of any race, any color, anywhere, anytime can be an expression of either truth or of error. And you have to be awake and alert enough to know what's what and who's who, and to love enough not to tolerate it.
And I think if you can't stand something or somebody, but you act like you do, that qualifies as halting between two opinions.
Yes, it does.
Right, because it's dishonest.
It is. You forfeit divine help. It is hypocrisy. That's why it's very refreshing when people say what they mean and mean what they say, even though it might not be politically correct. At least it's getting out there and they're being honest. And that's true in science too. Because I was trying to hide everything rather than just being honest, saying what I thought. Because how can you come out of any situation unless you say what you think? And then if it's right, great. And if it isn't, you'll learn.
Well, Jesus was the perfect example. He didn't say tolerate.
He did not.
He said judge not. And that, to me, speaks to all of it.
Thank you. Exactly.
But I think, though, that, the seeing correctly, which only Christian Science teaches, is most important. Seeing correctly, not as people or this or that, but seeing what God has made.
Yes, and that's the benediction of love.
Thank you. Yes. And that's the truth.
That's the truth. And that's the love that heals, not tolerates. It heals. So yes, seeing it correctly.
So you have to dare to speak up to someone if you have to.
Yes, you do. And you certainly handle it in your own thinking, and you have to. Mrs. Eddy says, never breathe an immoral atmosphere unless an attempt to purify it. And that was your quote from your testimony on Wednesday, Jeremy, because he had, go ahead, tell them.
Well, yeah, I was tolerating a lot over the years, but coming here and learning about all this and plenty of practitioner support, I finally was able to get to the point where I was able to tell my kids what was needed to be said. And I felt better and they felt better. And it was wonderful. So I don't know. I feel that when at every stage of learning Christian Science, when something was overcome, there's that reward. And then you're like, all right, I don't want the consequence anymore. I want to keep getting that reward, the reward for the good. So.
And that quote, the first part of that quote in Science and Health is never withhold the rebuke. Never withhold the rebuke. And the reason sometimes I emphasize this so much is because this is what has been lost. And this is what Mrs. Evans and Mrs. Eddy brought that missing link to why the science didn't heal. Because it was all, to me, what I was getting from it was all toleration and we must be loving and all of this. And yet all hell could be breaking loose everywhere. And I would just, stiff upper lip. That's not science. Science is much deeper. And this is true love. And it has to be both principle and love. And yes, the quote again that Parthens gives us, truth, life, and love are a law of annihilation to everything unlike themselves because they declare nothing except God. Another one of my favorites, Science and Health quotes.
So the reason we don't tolerate error is because truth, life, and love do not tolerate error. Period.
I love the thought, though, also that it is only truth that corrects error. Evil does not correct evil.
No, it does not. And when evil tries, it's a terrible mess. And of course, that's never divine love operating. If you come out of hate or fear or resentfulness, you're in the wrong mind, and you better off just being quiet till you get yourself in a right state. And then he goes on, Parthens, the altar that Elijah built and baptized in water was completely consumed by the fire of God, the heat of which can only be compared to that of a nuclear blast, in that it dematerialized even its 12 stones and the dust surrounding it. The appearance of the fire of God and the presence that annihilates everything unlike itself meant also the disappearance of Elijah's material altar, and this prefigured what Jesus said to the woman at the well. They that worship God must worship him in spirit and in truth. John 4. And then, Spirit of God, descend upon my heart. Wean it from earth, through all its pulses move. The kindling of the heaven descended dove, my heart an altar, and thy love the flame. George Crowley. Your heart, the altar, and love. Love is what inspires it and keeps your heart burning as you give your heart, your soul, your everything to the Father. The love is the flame. Love inspires, designates,
And leads the way.
And leads the way. And it is always love. Always. It has to be. But it must have that principle. Otherwise, it is just mush. So anyone else that wants to speak?
I just wanted to mention that growing up in science and going to Sunday school in really wonderful churches, when I became a young adult and later I realized that there was a lot of immorality going on that was being tolerated, whether it was adultery or, under the guise of sort of, now this was in San Francisco, but just when there was a wonderful elderly woman who called me on the carpet once for what looked like some immoral behavior, which probably was. And I was shocked because nobody had ever, not my mom, not my dad, not my mentors, had ever stood up for what is right. And because there was this gray intolerance, these, shades of gray. And then when I came to Plainfield, it was no BS, no bourgeois, as Mrs. Evans used to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first time that people were really standing up for principle and truth. And there's only one truth. There aren't several shades of truth. There's either truth or error. And when I look back, I think part of the problem in the movement was this tolerance. I mean, when I look back, it's pretty shocking of what went on, behind the facade. And if there wasn't as much healing going on as people would have liked, well, then are we truly living the truth and being honest and moral? And I just wanted to bring that up because for me that was a huge revelation.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know I was shocked by when I met Mrs. Evans, the way she talked, the way she would wipe out error, and she wasn't afraid to. She'd say whatever came to her to rebuke it, and me included. And sometimes I would be shaking in my boots, and the error in me would be shaking in my boots. But I will be everlastingly grateful for that.
That also goes back to Solomon. And I don't know when all the wives came in. Would be interesting to find that. I haven't found that yet. But the prophet Nathan was his mentor. He had also been a mentor to David. And so I think he kind of trained and raised Solomon. And it was when he passed on that all these things happened. So it was like Nathan was Solomon's Mrs. Evans, or Mrs. Eddy, or Jesus Christ, and kept him on track. And unfortunately, after Nathan passed on, he didn't continue to have somebody or have it within himself to stay on the correct track.
Yes. Yes. It's needed. And people still ask, why there aren't more independent Christian Science churches, because there aren't more Mrs. Evans who is willing to put her neck out like she did. So, and remember, in this forum with Parthens, the annihilation of it, even the rocks, everything was destroyed. And that's how God works. And if you are living, even in a degree, with truth, life, and love, error will be repelled. It will stay out of your life. But if you are not, then if everything seems to be topsy-turvy, then instead of praying for the circumstances to change, pray for more truth, life, and love. And the circumstances will change to the degree they're in your heart, mind, and soul. And I've always loved where Mrs. Eddy says in Science and Health, the confidence inspired by science lies in the fact that truth is real and error is unreal. Error is a coward before the truth. It never fails. This was why everyone says the story is so wonderful, how Elijah had such great confidence in this truth. There was no doubt in his mind. He could pour water over and over again, and he knew the truth was going to work. No question about it. And this is how it must be in our hearts, aflame with love. And how do we do it? By continually turning to the truth, continually expressing gratitude for all that God has done, and not be mesmerized by the conditions of the world. Because believe me, Elijah did not just conjure this up. So we're going to end today with this article that Dear Jacob sent us a while ago, excerpt from Confidence by Martha Harris Bogue. And it's, listen carefully.
This is on our website. Confidence is a quality of mind with a capital M, a quality of God. Since confidence is God-given, the statement, I lack confidence, is false. The person who is declaring the lack of confidence to succeed is very confident of his ability to fail. Jesus said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God which worketh in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. We are to work out our salvation, deliverance from the belief of power in evil, with fear and trembling. Not wait until we get out of fear and the trembling has stopped before we attempt to overcome. It is his pleasure, his will, that we should fail in that which he has bidden us to do. Is it his pleasure, his will, that we should fail in that which he has bidden us to do, resist the devil? Is it his will that we should make mistakes? Of course not. We are to take up the cross daily, take up whatever is opposed to God that crosses our path, not as something, but as nothing, and put it out of the way. Fear is faith in evil. Courage is faith in God. Doubt is trust in evil. Confidence rightly directed is trust in God, good. When we are afraid, we can ask ourselves, where is my faith? What am I trusting in? Good or evil? Spirit or matter? If we fail, it is because our faith is in the wrong thing. When a very young student, I was called to see a woman who had not stood on her feet or sat in a chair for over 10 years. Medical science had entirely failed. My teacher had given my name to the invalid's family. and I felt that obedience demanded that I should go. I surely went with fear and trembling. All the way, I studied science and health. And all the time, personal sense argued that someone else should have been sent, that if I should fail, the cause of Christian Science would suffer, until I almost wished I could take the train back and send an older practitioner. Then the consciousness came that those in need had not sent for me, they had sent for Christian Science. I saw that all that was trembling and fearing had no part in it, could neither hinder nor help. That revealed truth was to do the work, and it was competent. That I did have confidence in God. And these words came, quote, "Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid. Neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest." End quote. My confidence in God's ability, in the power of the word, began at once to take the place of confidence in my own ability to fail. I left self-reliance behind, and with God-reliance went to the woman. I was able to remain only about 4 hours, but before I left the patient, she walked across the room and sat in a chair. The next morning, she was dressed and went to her breakfast with the family. She has been a well woman ever since. In this, I learned that I must never let fear and trembling keep me from taking the step before me. We do not need confidence in our own ability, but we do need confidence in God's ability and willingness to work in us, to give us dominion over all the earth. And we must have the willingness to take the steps and prove to ourselves and others that God is omnipotent.
Trust in truth and have no other trusts. Mary Baker Eddy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.